Imagine this. Hurricane Milton, already one of the most powerful storms on record, continues to intensify as it churns over the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. But what if Milton goes even further? What if it surpasses the limits we thought were possible for a hurricane on Earth? Could such a storm exist, and what would that mean for our planet? To understand how a hurricane could exceed Earth's natural limits, we first need to know what those limits are. Hurricanes are fueled by warm ocean water and moist air. The basic ingredients for a hurricane are warm sea surface temperatures, usually 80 degrees Fahrenheit or higher humid air, and a pre-existing weather disturbance. But even with all the right conditions, hurricanes are still constrained by the laws of physics, particularly by the atmosphere and Earth's rotation. The two key factors that define a hurricane's intensity are wind speed and atmospheric pressure. The strongest hurricanes, like Hurricane Patricia in 2015, reached maximum sustained winds of 215 miles per hour and extremely low central pressure, but these storms are still well within Earth's natural limits. The Earth limit for hurricanes is determined by a few key factors. For wind speed, there's a theoretical maximum that a hurricane could reach, which scientists estimate to be around 220 to 230 miles per hour. Beyond this, the storm's structure becomes unstable, and the forces that hold it together, like the eye wall, begin to break down. As for pressure, the lower the pressure at the center of the storm, the more powerful the winds. The lowest recorded pressure for a hurricane is around 870 millibars, but theoretically, the lowest limit Earth could sustain is around 850 millibars. This natural cap exists because Earth's atmosphere is only so thick and can only hold so much energy in the form of heat and pressure. In a sense, the planet acts as a kind of pressure cooker, where only so much heat can be trapped before the system becomes unstable. Hurricanes thrive on the warm waters and air, but once they reach a critical point, the sheer forces inside the storm become so violent that they start tearing the storm apart. However, with climate change warming oceans and creating more favorable conditions for super hurricanes, we're seeing more storms push the boundaries of what we thought was possible. Now, let's imagine what happens if Hurricane Milton pushes beyond these thresholds while still out at sea. What if it reached wind speeds far greater than 230 miles per hour or pressure levels lower than any storm in recorded history? If Hurricane Milton were to exceed these natural limits, it would enter uncharted territory, both scientifically and meteorologically. If Milton's wind speeds surpassed 230 miles per hour, it would become nearly impossible for the storm to maintain its structure. In hurricanes, the eye wall, the area of the most intense wind and rain, would likely begin to disintegrate due to the sheer force of the winds. These extreme wind speeds could tear the storm apart, scattering energy in a chaotic way. However, if it managed to maintain its structure while reaching these super hurricane speeds, the effects would be devastating. These winds would be strong enough to level buildings, rip trees from the ground, and send debris flying through the air at deadly speeds. Coastal cities would face destruction on an unprecedented scale. Even well-built structures designed to withstand Category 5 storms might not survive a hurricane that exceeds Earth's limits. When pressure in a hurricane drops, it creates a vacuum-like effect that pulls in surrounding air, fueling the storm. If Milton's central pressure were to fall below 850 millibars, we'd be looking at a storm capable of unprecedented damage. Such low pressure would make Milton a mega hurricane with an enormous reach. Its wind field could expand to cover hundreds of miles, potentially impacting entire regions. Storm surges, already the most dangerous part of any hurricane, would reach incredible heights. With atmospheric pressure so low, Milton's surge could be significantly higher than anything ever seen before, flooding areas far inland. For context, a 15-foot storm surge is already life-threatening. Milton could push surges to 20, 25, or even 30 feet, swallowing coastal cities whole. Imagine entire cities submerged in water, with floodwaters reaching deep into inland communities. Even cities that aren't typically considered at risk could be heavily affected. If Milton exceeded Earth's limits, the storm would become so large and intense that its reach could expand into unexpected regions, hitting areas that have never had to face hurricanes before. For example, regions further north like Georgia, Alabama, and even the Carolinas could experience direct hurricane-force winds and storm surges, despite being far from Milton's original projected path. If Hurricane Milton exceeded Earth's limits, the results would be catastrophic, not just for the areas it directly hit, but for the planet's overall climate systems. A storm like this could accelerate the effects of climate change by altering ocean currents and temperature patterns. Hurricanes act as a heat pump, moving warm water from the ocean's surface into the atmosphere. If a storm as powerful as Milton exceeded Earth's limits, it could significantly disrupt the balance of heat in the atmosphere and oceans, creating ripple effects for years to come. It might lead to more intense and frequent hurricanes in the future. Coastal ecosystems would be decimated. Wetlands, coral reefs, and other natural barriers that help protect shorelines from storm surges would be wiped out. Entire ecosystems could be lost, causing long-term damage to biodiversity in the region. The storm could erode coastlines, change the shape of islands, and leave lasting scars on the environment. If Hurricane Milton exceeded Earth's limits and made landfall, the damage would be beyond anything we've seen before. Millions could be displaced as their homes are destroyed. Entire cities might need to be rebuilt from scratch, and the economic toll could run into the trillions of dollars. Government responses would be stretched thin, even with the help of international aid. FEMA would likely be overwhelmed, unable to respond quickly enough to address the widespread damage. The military would likely be called in to help manage evacuation efforts and rescue missions, but even they might struggle with the scope of the disaster. Hospitals, schools, and public services would be severely impacted, possibly leading to a breakdown in civil infrastructure in the most heavily affected areas. Recovery efforts could take decades, and some communities might never fully recover. Could a hurricane ever exceed Earth's natural limits? While the laws of physics suggest that hurricanes are bound by certain constraints, recent trends show that storms are getting stronger, fueled by warming oceans and rising global temperatures. Hurricanes like Milton, which strengthened rapidly, are becoming more common as sea surface temperatures continue to rise due to climate change. So while it's unlikely that a hurricane would surpass Earth's limits anytime soon, we are already seeing storms push the boundaries of what we once thought was possible. Hurricane Patricia, Typhoon Tip, and now Hurricane Milton are all examples of how quickly things can escalate. If trends continue, we may one day see a hurricane so powerful that it challenges the very limits of our planet's atmosphere. And what happens after a storm like Milton? Global responses to this kind of disaster would likely include an unprecedented level of coordination between countries, with international relief agencies stepping in to support efforts. Countries like the United States would have to deploy their full array of resources, military, economic, and humanitarian, to begin the recovery process. But the question remains, could even the best prepared nations cope with the aftershocks of such a disaster? Economies could be pushed to the brink, and global supply chains could be disrupted as infrastructure is destroyed in key coastal regions. As we face the reality of stronger and more dangerous storms in a warming world, it's crucial to understand what could happen if a hurricane like Milton pushes past Earth's natural limits. While this remains a hypothetical scenario, the possibility of storms becoming more intense is all too real. We can only hope that hurricanes like Milton don't exceed the limits of what we can handle. But the truth is, we must prepare for the possibility that one day they might. Stay informed, stay prepared, and let's hope we never see a storm that exceeds what Earth's atmosphere can handle. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more thought-provoking what-if scenarios. Share your thoughts below. What do you think would happen if a hurricane ever exceeded Earth's limits?